Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to yet another Sunday night. This is Preacher Season 1, Episode 5, titled The South Will Rise Again. We are the after show panel for AFTERBUZZ TV. We're going to break down the whole episode for you. We're halfway through Season 1. It's crazy. There's so much to talk about. Huge episode tonight. We'll see you guys in just 1 second.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
You just walk on in the door. Heaven's den, there's a look.
Was I out of the room when we decided to play this song?
No, this is what's played during the episode. and yes, you were out of the room, and Mark and I made executive decisions that it was gold.
Okay.
Nice choice, Roxy.
Thank you, sir.
Rock solid. See what I did there? It's good. What's up, everybody? Welcome to AFTERBUZZ TV's Preacher After Show. As I said just a minute ago, we are halfway through Season 1. This is insane. I can't believe it went so fast. I can't believe we're 5 episodes. What's like the general feeling you guys have just after 5 episodes? We're halfway through. I know, Roxy, your theory on TV is you give it 6. You always give it 6 before you make your decision, but...
That's one more, Ben.
Yeah, I realize that. But just right now, after you had to give us the
That's how I feel.
sneak peek.
I feel I've got one more for it to really wow me. It has not quite wowed me.
Yeah.
There are characters I'm invested in. There's storylines I'm more interested in than others. But so far, you know, I think we've got a little bit of a way to go, which is exciting.
Yeah.
It's because I was like, oh, Roxy, there's 6 episodes. And the thing we're like, 6 episodes. But then watching,
I love that I've pushed that on you guys.
Yeah.
But then watching what at least lies ahead for next episode, I was like, oh man, she's gonna nail it, because I feel like we're about turning the corner. I've had my problems with the slowness this season, but I felt like this episode, like, all right, I think everything's starting to click into place.
Well, yeah, I think I'm kind of with you on that. I get the feeling that we're on the brink of a change, and there's a few very specific character decisions that they've made so far that I think we will, when we do see those changes, and I think we can all expect that they're coming. We'll talk about why in a little bit. Maybe the show and the tone of the show changes a little bit. I'm not sure. It'll be a lot of fun to count down sort of each of the little categories that happen tonight, and as we revisit each of these characters, because I do think that we're seeing, you know, a dramatic change in a certain direction. So before we get into all that, I should remind everybody, of course, that AFTERBUZZ TV and us personally, we are all on Twitter. So if you want to follow any of us, my name is Ben Bateman. I'm on Ben Bateman Media on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm Roxy Striar. You can find me everywhere at Roxy Striar.
And I'm Frank Moran. You can follow me on Twitter at Happy Go Jackie.
Happy Go Jackie. Our boy Dave is not here this week. He's absent, but he'll be jumping back on board next week.
What would be the opposite of Happy Go Jackie? Like Sad Go Fred?
Sad leave.
Oh yeah, sad.
That's right.
Sad leave. How do you say Jackie backwards?
Or Sad Stay.
Thank you.
That was good. That was good,
for the
Rox. What's the Jackie? Who's a famous Jackie that there's the opposite of? Jackie. John, maybe?
Yeah,
Jackie
or
Kennedy?
Ed. Yeah.
John? Sad leave John?
Something about this feels like it doesn't have to do with Preacher. I know I brought it up, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Fair enough. So, guys, then, of course, AFTERBUZZ TV, we're on Twitter as well, so at AFTERBUZZ TV. If you give us a rating and a review on iTunes, it helps us stay high in the standings, and we provide free content. We want to continue to provide free content. If you guys help us by giving us a rating and a review for this after show, it will let us continue to do that. Let's decide to get into the episode right now. Let's do it. I just decided.
Oh, nice.
Let's talk about the cowboy, the very stoic cowboy that we've now seen twice, that doesn't have a title yet and hasn't done anything
On the show.
dramatic yet. Oh, that reminds me. The one thing I like to point out is that we're comic book readers on this panel. Preacher is a very famous comic book, if you didn't know. And we will sort of give a little bit more specific spoiler predictions at the end of the episode. So we like to pretend as if we don't exactly know what's happening and just take things at face value, what we've seen in the episode, and give our analysis based on that. At the end of the episode, though, we will definitely kind of revisit each of these things quickly and give a few predictions based on what we actually know. So if you have read the comics and you'd like to know, let's make sure that we do that. Otherwise, we're gonna get into the episode, and I should remind everybody that the Preacher on AMC actually has a podcast themselves. The Preacher Insider podcast.
Yeah, we're going to be playing a little clip for you guys later on from it, but it's awesome, and they're helping support us. We really want to support them. It's really, really great podcast, so we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, it's really cool. AMC's been doing this with their shows now. I listened to a lot of the Better Call Saul ones when they were on. They get the whole inside crew to sit down and talk. So I believe this episode has Evan Goldberg and Sam Catlin sitting down and talking shop a little bit.
Oh, cool.
What's going on with the show, and those guys obviously, know what's going on a little better than we do because they made the show. So
Very true.
So yeah, that's how we open those. We open on this character that we don't know the name of yet on the show, and it's a long opening. I want to say it's like 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it's certainly been several episodes since we saw the first setup for this.
Yeah, right.
Do you think this would have been more effective if it had been kind of like this whole 7 may have been broken up in a little bit smaller chunks, so we had it spread out over several episodes, as opposed to just doing 2 kind of scattered apart?
Or as opposed to doing 1 full episode on it, or a longer bit and not just an intro. I think it was weird how short the first one was, and the second one being a little longer. It felt unbalanced to me, and us still knowing that we haven't even dropped anything in the bucket yet. Like, we don't even know what's going on at this point. So I feel like if there was resolution, it would have been okay if we split it up evenly, but I don't know how much more of the story they're going to tell like this.
Yeah.
Well, it's very weird, right? Because we keep talking about on this panel how there's a sense that they've made this to be a binge show. Like, if you watch all this in a row, maybe everything connects. And it does feel more and more like that the more we watch it.
And I've been seeing that online everywhere, people saying that. The show is made for Netflix. The show would be awesome binge that way. So
yeah. And what's interesting about that is, you know, the story with that cowboy that we're seeing so far, it looks a bit like we're watching a piece of Unforgiven. That's kind of what it feels like we're watching, right? You see him at the beginning, and he knows that he has to go and get this medicine because he's got a family, and so he goes to Ratwater, and he's encountering people along the way, and he's having some sort of moral crisis because he doesn't want to step in and help what's going on, these horrible things he's seeing. We find out that he was, an artist of a killer, and on his way back, he has this crisis. He decides to go back and help because he sees, this kid watching these atrocities happening.
That was that little moment you're like, oh, wow,
right.
Yeah, that was a little disturbing.
And he goes back and he just gets the
really disturbing
crap beaten out of him, but he holds on to the medicine for his family. And on his way back, after his horse gets killed, they're just setting up all these obstacles for him to get back. He does get back, and his family has died due to the sickness. And
they're getting eaten by
crows.
Yeah.
So then he heads back to Ratwater, and we cut. The weird thing about this so far is that the whole story, what it seems like is going to happen, because he's an artist of a killer, we find out, and he dicks his guns, and he's going back. I think we all assume he's going to go back and at least try to kill some people. This feels like you're watching Unforgiven, which is very classic and a great story, but why break it up so much?
Yeah, I don't understand the structurally what that is getting them, at least at this point. I mean, maybe after we look back on the season, we understand a little bit better what their end game was, but it seems weird now why it's being broken up this way.
Maybe they're trying to pull in the audience. If you are somebody who's relating or appreciating this part of the story, you're going to hang in till next week. If you're somebody who's liking the Tulip part of the story, you're going to hang in till next week. This is a very different, unique take on a story, obviously shot in different lens, different filter, different kind of character, different time period, all of those things. So maybe they're trying to drag that out a little bit and make the fans of that story be a fan of this overall story.
That feels to me like I could see that being the case, but I feel over and over and over again so far this season that it's just set up, no payoff. Set up, no payoff. And it's weird to be halfway into the season and feel like I just don't see where the payoff has been yet. And that we're going to talk about each of the things we saw tonight. I think that there's a bit of that in every single storyline from tonight's episode. Almost every storyline had some amount of the dangling carrot and not quite getting there yet.
Although I do feel as if we did get some payoff in tonight's episode.
You think so?
Yeah, we'll talk about it as we break down the stories.
Okay, great. So this character, this cowboy, he leaves, he's on the road. Any other thoughts on that before we... I mean, I think can we all agree it seems like he's going for revenge? That's would strike you?
I was really sad about the horsey.
Yeah.
Don't.
We find that he fought Gettysburg in the 4th Virginian. And this guy, this preacher that kills his horse, fought in the 8th Ohio. So we have a little bit of background on this character. So we know something.
And we know that from the other character's perspective, this guy loves to kill.
Yep. But for some reason, given the opportunity, he didn't seem to be involved in any horrible things. That's right. So you see that he passed all of these hanging, all of these hung Native Americans, right? And scalps were being turned in for money. He didn't seem like he had taken any scalps to sell. Yeah. He could have. He didn't stop what was going on in the bar the first time through. He stayed away from it.
Only because I know he made that vow to his wife. It's like, when she said, don't get involved. You got to just stay focused, get the medicine, and get right back.
So we know that it's all for her. And now she's gone, you would wonder what's going to happen, right?
Because he has that moment of conscience, and we can certainly get into more at the end of the episodes. We talk about the comics and stuff too.
Yeah.
But how much that moment of conscience is that a way to just kind of obliterate that sense for that character going forward? Or is that something that's going to be used as a touchstone where it's going to be he has another chance later on to make another choice, and will he make the same decision?
We got a lot of talk about it in the chat right now about this storyline. Yeah. People are saying, why hurt the animals? Yvonne said, I thought he was badass, and he got his ass kicked. Maya says, I love what they're doing with the cowboy guy. We have questions if the cowboy is human. Zach says, yes, he thinks he is human, not immortal. The cowboy feels disconnected to the Von Soto, which I think is exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I will say that I thought... Oh, go ahead. Anything else?
Yeah, a lot more. Andre says, I like how they're doing it with the cowboy. They're setting it up perfectly, in my opinion. Questions about if the cowboy's good, bad, all things like that.
So yeah, I think, and what I will say without giving anything away is that this is a good part of the story, and it's going to turn into something really satisfying later on. That's guaranteed. They won't change that in the story. I mean, I would be shocked if they did. And I will say also, I looked over at you, Roxy, when we finished watching that first part, and I was like, that was good. I'm glad. I thought we were going to get more of that story this episode. I'm a little disappointed we didn't.
The only flashbacks we go back to repeatedly in the episode, more so than just in the intro, is with his dad. That's the only one that we go back to.
And the stuff in
the heist.
Went wrong with Tulip.
Oh yeah, you're right.
They cut back to that
the heist
a lot.
with the Tulip. We went back to that, and we even saw that for a second in tonight's episode.
Yeah.
Didn't have any additional information.
No, which seemed weird just to see why put that little quick flashback in
that was
without
weird.
any more context.
Yeah. So speaking of Tulip, we got to see the next step in Tulip's relationship to Cassidy. Because in last week's episode, we had this moment where she sees him drinking blood out of a refrigerator case at the hospital. And so she's now inquiring with him, what's going on? You're a vampire. Tell me all about it. She's throwing all the cliches.
This was one of my favorite scenes of the entire episode.
Me too.
Because I thought it was really fun. It was quick. She was witty. He was witty back. I loved everything she threw at him, including the werewolf stuff. It was really strong, and it felt like it was in the correct tone to me.
Yep.
What I liked about this is it was just bringing up an idea and then addressing it. Let's talk about it, as opposed to stuff that's been frustrating with Jesse and Cassidy talking.
Right.
Where it's like you're not having that moment where they're actually talking to each other. They're just talking past each other.
Right, but not let's harp on it. Okay, I understand what's going on. I saw you drinking blood. You're a vampire. Do you do this? No? All right, now get out of my place.
And she's totally comfortable with it. She's okay with it, which is great. Like, I like that. I mean, I liked all of the humor there. Do you kill people not if they don't deserve it? I prefer single malt.
Yes.
There's humor. It was good. And so then they move downstairs after they've kind of gone through that. And, Cassidy's kind of trying to press her, what's going on? Do you have a boyfriend? I've fallen for you. And she's describing this guy who we all assume is Jesse, that she seems to think is her boyfriend. And she keeps saying, that it's definitely Jesse now, thinking about it, because she talks about the Carlos stuff.
Yeah.
And she's just sort of acting like he's going to see the light. And it's weird. This has been an issue for me this whole season. And, we've talked a lot on here about how we wonder what's this show like if you haven't read the comics. Like, do you see this and these characters totally differently? I saw a friend of mine tonight who was watching it who had never read the comics. And he was like, yeah, I like it. It's interesting. Some of the characters are fun. It moves at a weird pace, but I like it. Which... Thinking about the issues that I have with some of the relationships, maybe, they're absolved if you don't know what's going on. If it's all new information to you, I guess that's the case. But there's definitely this thing that they're doing with Tulip that is bothering me a little bit, which is that they're not making her a very elegant or attractive character. I think over and over again they make her. She's got this pride, but that's kind of the most redeemable quality she has is her pride and I guess the sense of morality.
I think it's the best part of her. I think she's a ridiculously attractive character. She's a go-getter. She's a strong woman. She's laying it all out. She's badass. She's ready to. I think she's very attractive. I don't think Tulip was ever supposed to be. Was the other one elegant? She
just doesn't. She feels crude, and she feels like she's trying really hard a lot. And like I mean, I guess, again, like Jesse, the show's called Preacher. He's the preacher, and he seems to have no interest or attraction to her. It's hard for me with Cassidy because Cassidy's kind of like a degenerate in a lot of ways. That's like, him being attracted to her doesn't make her seem like this, like she doesn't feel like the prize if the main character who you feel like she's after doesn't give a shit.
Well, I think the hard thing is that it seems so much of this relationship between Jesse and Tulip is predicated about what happened with Carlos and everything that went bad. As she says, like 2 years ago, everything went downhill, everything changed.
Yeah.
So without ever seeing that,
but they lost everything.
yeah, it's like, yeah, if we could have saw what they were like before and saw what that had impact, but all we've done is had these teases about this Carlos incident without knowing the full scope of what that is and how it changed their relationship. It's tough to get on board with Tulip and Jesse right now. You're like, okay, clearly it changed in both in different ways, but we really don't know the extent because we've never seen what the relationship was like before this whole Carlos incident.
Like, don't you guys wish a little bit that like the whole story she tells when they're at the diner about we were driving across town running these Komodo dragons and it was this illegal thing and he was into it and he had, because she describes the Jesse that we want to see. That's what she describes. The way that I want to keep referencing the comic books, but like the character that the whole entire show is supposed to be built on, in theory, that's who she's describing. We've never seen it. Why couldn't they have just shown it to us? That's right. Why couldn't that have been
flashback to
I just want to see Jesse act that way.
Yeah.
He like doesn't act that way ever.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, but switching gears a little bit, because going back to her with Cassidy,
Right.
You had mentioned that Cassidy's saying, I've fallen for you, or whatever it is. Do we think he's full of crap in that moment? Because I don't feel like we know Cassidy well enough to take him at face value, but I also I felt like it was an earnest performance. So how did you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do like his line when he says, I'm too old to play games. You know, so it's like, I feel like if he has a genuine attraction for somebody, he's going to be just honest about it.
Right. He also made that funny comment, I guess linoleum's back in again.
Yeah.
Which I like because it's poking fun of the fact that he's so old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question you pose. Is he full of crap? With Cassidy, there's a little bit of a conniving side to him that feels like he's always full of crap a little bit. He's got I think a good heart, but it doesn't seem like in all cases he takes the world very seriously. So everything seems like a bit of a joke to him. What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, and he's not being very duplicitous about what he wants. I mean, he's interested in Tulip, but he's also like, do you have any opiates? And can I get a hold of this? And
Yeah.
Can you help me get a hold of it? So he's certainly not trying to connive his way around what he wants. He's upfront about what he wants. And if he's attracted to you, he's going to say it. And if he wants to needs help from you to get some drugs or some ladies, he's going to ask that too.
Yeah.
Maya in the chat says, I think he actually likes her. I mean, she's probably the first/only person who knows he's a vampire and accepts it. Andre says, by the way, in the scene in the diner, I thought Jesse and Tulip had great chemistry. And Puka wants to know, why does Tulip have to be elegant or attractive in the story?
Yeah, I guess she doesn't have to be. I guess I'm just finding her character.
You just are thinking about the comics and trying to relate it.
No, I'm finding that, like I said, I think it was Goldberg who said to me that it's sort of the three main characters as opposed to one main character and his two lieutenants in this show.
You're talking about when you red carpet interviewed him for the premiere.
That was one of the things he told me, and it's interesting when you think about that. Like they are changing the narrative a little bit, so this show does feel a little different, and Tulip has much more personality. She's a lot more sort of vigor in this character. They gave her like a real sense of humor. But I find her frustrating more than I find her satisfying. It's a good point. She doesn't have to be elegant or attractive. It's not necessary.
Somebody else earlier in the chat too was mentioning that they feel like Emily is the Tulip of the show. She's more similar to the Tulip in the comics than Tulip is in the show, if that makes sense. So maybe that's a direction they're going in.
And I know that you were saying that they wanted them to be kind of Jesse, Cassidy, and Tulip kind of being the stars of their own stories there.
Yeah.
And I feel like the challenge with Tulip so far is it's been, her storyline has been, for the most part, other than dealing with the one woman at the brothel that was killed and having heard of those kind of moments. But her main story just seems to be, we can't really get it going until Jesse gets on board, because it's so much about her wanting Jesse to come with her. Let's get Carlos. Let's do this. And with Jesse constantly saying no, we're never having a chance to see what's next. How's that relationship change when they actually start going off on whatever mission that's going to be?
Yeah, it is weird that the storyline this season very much seems to be the redemption of Jesse Custer. Like that's the story they're selling, because he's obviously using this power to like play God for a second. Doesn't feel like that's going to be very satisfying to watch for a long time. So I think he'll come around, and she seems to be the one who's intent on saving him from that. So that's the moment, right? Her conviction.
Interesting, because I feel like it's so much more about setting up Jesse for a huge fall this season, because he's got this new power and he's using it he's using it incorrectly.
Yeah.
I feel like, and we're going to just see everything that he's setting up just kind of tumble down.
He's also using it incredibly vaguely, such as forgive her
Yeah.
or forgive him in this episode or trust your instinct, whatever it is. I feel like he's got to get a little more specific. At some point, when you believe you have the voice of God, as we hear he believes tonight, you need to be very clear with what that means. And I don't even know if he put together the pieces about Ted from the first episode, that he even did that. Like, be specific, be clear, realize with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
I butchered that quote, but you know what I'm talking about.
He doesn't seem to be there yet, and it definitely, I agree, there is a fall coming. Also, something interesting, and we'll touch on this when we get to Fior and DeBlanc a little later, he does find out at the end of this episode that it's not God inside him.
Yeah.
Which I think will change the stakes for him a little bit, because it's gonna open some questions up that he has to ask. But I do want to finish the Cassidy and Tulip story from this episode, because it goes further. She confronts Jesse in the diner. Jesse doesn't want to hear it. He convinces her that he's changed. So Tulip goes out to find Cassidy. She sent him out to the hardware store across from the strip club. She assumes he's at the strip club, and she robs a drugstore on the way to get him some opiates. Finds him, gives him the pills, and then they bone in the back of a car. Did you guys see that coming?
No, I mean, I guess it's just like, that seemed like such a weird step to take, because she seems so smitten and so in love with Jesse. I don't know, I mean, is it just like feeling spurned from him at that moment in the diner when he's talking to everybody else, that she just does something kind of foolish and silly with Cassidy?
So the look on her face said, yeah.
No, I saw this coming a million miles away. If you listen back to our show from last week, I talked about the fact that the way they're setting up Jesse and Tulip's relationship right now is, I think, might be unrepairable. And I think that they're setting her up way more so with Cassidy, and that's an interesting choice, but I'm trying to follow that based on the fact that she wanted to sleep with him tonight, or she did sleep with him, she got him the opiates. I think she's clearly lining him up to go with him to kick the crap out of Carlos.
I mean, I guess, who do you want as your wingman? A vampire? I mean, that seems to,
I don't think it's who she wants as her wingman.
No.
I think she wants Jesse, but I think she's realizing, as Cassidy said to her tonight, maybe he's not the man you thought he was, and so she's thinking, all right, what can I do to get this guy on my team? I'm going to have sex with him, I'm going to get him his opiates, and then I'm going to wrangle him in to get this job done that my man won't get done with me.
I don't think it takes that much to do it. I mean, certainly the opiates and sex is nice cherry on top, but just during that conversation right there in the kitchen, I mean, while she thinks are you making fun of me? It's like, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. You want this, and you want this vengeance.
He said, I'm not pissing on it, or something.
Yeah.
It was great, whatever, how I rephrased it.
So, I mean, I certainly feel like it wouldn't take much for Cassidy to help out Tulip in the situation.
I'm not taking a piss, that's what he said.
Yeah.
Anything in the chat?
Anime says she was upset over the girl found at his house. That might be part of the reason why,
True.
too.
Emily, that's her.
Yeah.
Her
Yeah, a lot of
scene.
people were talking about that, too.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I have a prediction for what's going to happen with that, but we can save that for predictions. In any case, definitely an interesting turn. I mean, definitely that's a payoff of some kind. That's definitely some dramatic payoff. They're setting up one relationship, and they're definitely taking that relationship in a specific direction. Something happened there, which is good. I guess more and more, I just feel like this show is easier to watch if you haven't read the book. This is the first time I've ever experienced this, actually, because Walking Dead being the best example I can think of something where I've watched the show closely and read the book, I never have found myself frustrated with the show because it doesn't follow the book, or like something different in the show and I'm like, oh, I don't like this because it's not accurate. Maybe I don't know why that is, but for some reason this one feels very different. Like I have a hard time following it.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's just like, because certainly Robert Kirkman's Walking Dead, the comic. I mean, certainly it's the premise is a zombie film, or what if a zombie film never ends, and you just continue that journey on for them. But other than that, I mean, it's not, given that context for the show, it's not so unrealistic or crazy, the situations that they find them in. But certainly Preacher, as the comic book series, a lot of fantastical things happen very quickly, and a lot of the characters are very, very arch, very stereotypical in some points, and I mean, a lot of fun, but also I think maybe tough to do, as well, we know it's taken 20 years to get to the screen. A lot of people find it very unadaptable.
Yeah.
So the changes for that, I think, make it harder for us who've read the series and enjoy it to kind of realize, like, wow, we were so invested in this complete story. To see these changes made, I think, makes it a little tougher for us as fans to go like, whoa, this is not exactly the story the way I remember it being told.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I want to touch on Jesse's character in general, where his character sits at the halfway point in the season. But before we do that, let's cue up the audio clip from Preacher, the Preacher Insider podcast, and see what Sam and Evan have to say. Maybe it'll give some light on some of the things we're talking about this episode.
Great.
The cowboy is a fan favorite, and anyone who's read the comic should know who he is pretty quick. And if they don't, You're
not a fan of the
themselves in disgrace because you're not a real fan.
So you can neither confirm nor deny anything.
I can't say anything except it's exactly what you think it is, if you know what it is. But if you don't know what it is,
You don't need to know. If you don't know, you'll find out. You'll figure it out.
but it's the part that I'm the most excited about. Every time I get to see anything based on the cowboy, I get giddy.
And is it a one-to-one with the comic, or are we going new directions with it, or?
It's
In some ways, that story is, in many ways, the most similar
yeah.
from Garth's comic. It's sort of, how do I say it? It's sort of, the context of the story is different. It actually sort of will resonate in a different way by the time it's over.
And
We'll see. It'll have everything to do, even though it takes place in 1881, you'll see by the end of the season that it has everything to do with Jesse.
Got it. So interesting. So that's from the beginning of our episode, the cowboy storyline we mentioned.
Right.
And it sounds like, yeah, it doesn't shine a whole lot more light on it than we thought.
They're sneaky in a good way.
Yeah. It's
They're
good.
giving us tidbits, but they're not spoiling it for us.
It leads me to believe, and you know what? Remind me when we get to spoiler predictions to touch on it again, because it brings up some thoughts that I have. But let's jump back into Jesse's character, because I think we're 5 episodes in. You know, we have 5 left, and whether or not you know what's going on comic book wise, they're setting up an unappetizing character right now. That's what they've done. They've put in our lap somebody who feels like he's selfishly using this word because he thinks he's playing the voice of God, essentially. He's trying to solve people's problems by just saying things. He bet that this guy that had no interest in coming to church to come to church so that he could essentially make an example out of him. He's fooling people, really. That's what he was doing with Quincannon. He fooled him into coming to church because he knew that he could cheat him.
I was really worried we were going to hear him use that voice on Tulip today.
It was interesting because I was like, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? And he doesn't.
Because he is tricking the people. He is, so...
Yeah, and so what I think is interesting about that, with the way they're setting up Jesse and how he's kind of like, he's not the bad guy, but he's just not. Well, he's not a good guy. Anyway, actually, let me hear your guys' opinions first, because I'll start mine.
Well, because I feel like certainly the series has been set up as that. I mean, Jesse certainly has made a promise to his father about all this. So he's come back and he's trying to save this town that clearly is not interested in saving itself. But all of a sudden he's given this power that now can give him like the cheat code.
Yep.
To help him fulfill this promise to his father there. But are you really saving people if you're compelling them to do so? I mean,
right.
So I feel like that's where we're seeing a lot of the hubris for Jesse when he has this new power, and it's all going to come crashing down into him by the end of the season.
I think there are moments where you could be saving people if you are specific enough. Saying, serve God, clearly not specific enough.
No, and because it's interesting because he does that scene with Cassidy where he's kind of testing a little bit, taking his powers for a test drive.
Right.
He kind of gets the idea of like, he's basically doing everything I say, but I guess he's not understanding I mean, as you were saying, Roxy, he's got to be so specific in exactly what he's telling somebody, or that the literalness can also just be a disaster for interpretation as well.
Well, it certainly feels like this. So he got when he's talking to Cassidy, as you said, fly, jump up and down, all those things, right? So he knows that he can tell people to do something exactly, and they will do it, right? Donnie, put this gun in your mouth. He knows that. I think he's combining what is reality to him, which is that he has this word, and the fact that he thinks he's a preacher saving this town, which he believes is his duty to God. That's the way he's feeling it. Even if it does feel like it's sort of an ego trip for him right now, that's what he believes is happening. So when he's being vague, I think it's this sense of faith that he has, which is that I have this faith that this is sort of my calling, right? This is my time to serve God, so I'm going to do this. But what's interesting about that is, do you remember, I know you've both read this, there's a brief moment. There's basically one moment, one panel, where he has the realization that he's not supposed to do that, which feels obviously upcoming. Otherwise, we're going to be watching this character that's just like a weird, not good guy who's a preacher the whole time, which I can't see is going to happen. He basically just says in the book at one point, like, I feel like I'm kind of getting it. I'm supposed to use this word, but not force people to. Basically, it's kind of like in one panel or so, he says, I'm kind of getting what I'm supposed to do with this thing.
Yeah.
And then the story changes, and then he gets it, right?
Yes.
I guess they want to take a whole season for that, or maybe not. I mean, they're definitely changing a lot, so...
It would be interesting to hear him flub. You know, we all say stupid things we don't mean, like go jump off a bridge and die. Hopefully you don't say that to people that you care about or whatever. But we all say things that we don't mean, and then to watch him say one of those things and see them happen, that would be like, okay, he's learning his way through it. But to watch him say such vague things that aren't specific to bad people who he knows are bad people. You can't just tell a bad person to be good. You need to walk them through it step by step. So I agree. Even if we did have that one moment where he was finally getting it, I would be okay seeing every few episodes him making some stupid mistake because he's human, kind of. But to watch him over and over again not nail his powers not a single time, there hasn't been one moment where I've been like, oh yeah, he totally got that one right. Not with open your eyes, not with serve God, not with be patient, not with any of these things so far. Then certainly not with open your heart.
Yeah, you almost wonder, like, is there going to be a moment in episode 8 where, you know, he has a moment where he realizes that something's gone wrong, and then maybe for a minute or two, the episode fades out with music playing. You see a little girl walk into Linus's house. You see Quincannon murdering people. You see, like, these things happening in the world that, like, are just happening constantly, and he hasn't done anything to change anything because these people that are evil. I almost wonder if they're setting us up for that moment, which is like, oh my God, this is so dark.
Yeah.
And then he starts to get it.
Well, because I mean, they certainly, and at the end of this episode, when he does meet the angels and finds out what he's operating under a false assumption that this is the word of God.
Yeah.
And so we see at the end of the episode, he realizes, oh wait, no, you think this is God, the word of God? It's not what you think. So I think maybe next episode we're going to start realizing that, you know, he's going to start getting that understanding that, okay, what I thought I had is not what I have, and this is a lot more dangerous than I thought.
It's just so strange to me that right now he is such an unlikable character, and somebody like Cassidy is quite a likable character to me, and that's a weird juxtaposition.
Well, because I think we're seeing Cassidy be Cassidy, and we're seeing Jesse fight against his better nature, or his natural instincts, and what he wants to be, and he's trying to be something different to serve his father. So I feel like we're seeing that part of it, and it's getting frustrating because you just like we know where the real Jesse is in there somewhere. We just want to see that character.
What's bizarre about this is I wouldn't be so convinced that we're going to see all of these changes with Jesse, except that, like, Tulip sitting there telling that story again about the Komodo dragon is so clearly setting up, this is the real you, this is the you, and why would they set that up unless they're just, Jesse's supposed to fail and he's supposed to just be not very sweet at all? But that's not the case, because we saw it in the first episode when he kicks Donnie's ass and he has this moment of like, I'm doing the right thing because I can still do this. So it's gonna happen and we're gonna see it. It's just very weird that they've decided to take this long. What do people in the chat think about Jesse's character?
I'll let you know.
Fair enough. So Jesse starts to get educated about the fact that this is not, in fact, God inside of him. There's just a brief conversation with Fior and DeBlanc. So let's kind of cover their story. They're rehearsing a little monologue from Fior when he's supposed to answer the heaven phone that's calling.
Yeah, this got a little frustrating, just the way that they dragged this out, because it's like, what's the interesting thing is at least for me, it's like the interesting thing is seeing them pick up that phone and try to have that conversation and see what happens after that. For them to hem and haw and practice what they're going to say and try to set the right tone for this whole episode, to only have the payoff for that be that the phone stops ringing just as they're about to pick it up. I'm like, ugh, why did we waste all this time?
Especially considering last week's episode ended with the phone ringing. That was last week's big cliffhanger.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so the pacing of that really frustrated me. And I was like, oh, man, it's like, I wish just move on with that.
I completely agree, but to play devil's advocate, I do like that they are differentiating these characters from one another. So Fiora has a personality, DeBlanc has a personality, and we're starting to see who is liked up there, who is disliked, who's playing who, and the way that works. So I've been looking at them as a clump. I think this show has made them a two as of last week with the vending machine, with all of that. And then this week, you should pick up, they like you when you do this, you should do that. I like that we're separating them a bit.
Yeah, agreed. And I didn't have the biggest problem. Like you said, that stuff was entertaining. And I said last week, too, some of the stuff with Fiora I think is funny. They've done a good job setting up the whole westernizing.
Anime Man 86 says the Angels need a spin-off mini show. So
it could be funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully they give us more of it. If not, maybe there's something in the cards. But let's chat a little bit more about just sort of like the various consequences of things going on in the town. So we jump from Fiora and LeBlanc to Eugene, and we get a little more clarity into what's going on
I'm having
here.
a really hard time stomaching the Eugene stuff, and I think that's a good thing, actually. I think that means they're really getting to me. Oh my God, do I feel bad for him. When the waitress calls Eugene it tonight, and I didn't know what was going to be waiting outside for Jesse, I was thinking, all right, maybe Cassidy is like bleeding outside or something with his organs dripping out. I don't know why. It's inhumane to me, and I feel awful, and we still don't know exactly what happened, but obviously people saying finish the job, I would assume means that he attempted to commit suicide in some kind of way, and they're saying finish the job there, but somehow by him doing that, he affected Tracy Loach.
Yep.
That's what I've gathered. Are you guys on that same page?
100%.
And I don't know if that was maybe like they were both going to try to commit suicide together. Maybe they were in a relationship and something like that. And
Yeah, it
went
could have
wrong.
been a pact, or maybe he was doing something and it ricocheted, or maybe he was doing something and she saw and it caused her to lose balance. I don't know, because people keep saying that they think that her accident had to do with horseback riding.
Yep.
Maybe she was on one and saw him and tried to help, and so I don't know exactly how the two incidences are linked, but they seem to be.
Or
Yeah,
certainly
definitely.
the sound of the shotgun going off could have startled the horse. She could have fallen off. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything like that. All of those are possible. I feel disgusted by the world when I watch the way that they deal with him, and I know that people have their own sentiments about suicide and what that means, and whether or not it is selfish or all those things aside. This is a kid. He is young, and I feel bad, and everybody's treating him so poorly and calling him murderer. And for his father to sit there at the dinner table and say, if you want to help me, maybe that's what you should do. Oh my God, this pulled at my heartstrings.
Finish the goddamn job.
I just felt awful for him. I felt awful, and I feel like Preacher's the only one he has. And I don't even know if I want him to go to Preacher, because I feel like Preacher's kind of a little douchey too.
Yeah, Preacher doesn't really seem to like... He kind of seems like helping Eugene's a bit of a chore, but he'll do it, but he doesn't really seem like he cares for it.
It wasn't really even helping him. It's not like he went there and he actually tried to deal with the situation. All he has to do is say, forgive him. Is that really helping somebody, just going and speaking 2 words? Like, no, it's like, all right, I'll just deal with this problem. Did you really deal with it? No.
No, but I feel like, again, it's like an example of where he feels like he has the cheat code to like get people to the quick route to making their lives better, what he thinks would make their lives better. And so rather than try to sit there and try to talk them through it, I can say 2 words and then boom, you're going to be taken care of.
Oh, this stuff makes me sick to my stomach. I just feel bad. Oh.
Well, they did something interesting with Sheriff Root, I thought, because that's the first moment we've seen him be kind of a dick a little bit, but he's been a bit of like a dick / comic relief. And, the mom is pretty much comatose. We've seen her a few times from, like, the other side of the room. And Eugene is so well-to-do. That's kind of his character they've written. But this was the first time we've seen Sheriff Root really just do something awful. Like, you can't say that to your son, especially when he's in that position. That's a horrible thing to say. And he sits there and he cleans up the pieces. So that's not a redeemable thing they set him up for. And you wonder, are they trying to paint him in a more negative light for a reason?
Well, I mean, I feel like whatever the circumstances, what happened with Eugene, I mean, certainly this is weighed a toll on him, because being the sheriff, having all the eyes on the town that, your son did something to somebody, another child that it seems to be in well-to-do standings amongst all the town. I feel that just has been weighing on him, and he lets that out, and certainly not justifiable. I mean, certainly a terrible thing to say to your son, but you see the reaction on his face afterwards, where even he feels like just, oh man, what have I done? I feel like that little moment where even he's realizing that was, I think I crossed the line by saying that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also when he's talking to Preacher, he says, can you help my dad? I've heard him crying at night. So you sort of wonder, what's the thing? What's Sheriff Root going through? What's in his head? What does he feel bad about? Does he feel horrible that his son's in this position? Does he feel horrible that he's in this position? Like, what's going on? I wonder if that will be revealed. Him saying that and not apologizing leads me to believe maybe there is a bit more evil and resentment in his heart than they've shown us so far in 5 episodes.
Going back to the question you asked earlier about Jesse, most of the chat seems to really like what they're doing with Jesse's character. Talking about Eugene, Renji says Eugene needs a better role model, which I completely agree with. Calypsy says, I completely agree with you, Roxy, about the Eugene stuff, so hey, you have a heart. Anime Man says this is the world's worst small town. Maya says, I'm worried he might actually kill himself at some point, which would be an interesting direction to go in. Really, really sad.
Seems very dark.
And for the most part, poor Eugene in here.
Yeah, it is definitely tragic. Heartstrings moment.
Andre saying Preacher just tries to take the easy way every time, which is like what you were saying, Frank.
Yeah,
Yep.
No, I mean that moment where you see Tracy's mom's just rage and just it's just unstoppable.
Yeah.
The way she just attacks that car with the bat, then with just that like part of the fencing or whatever. Just
yeah, because he says put it down, and she'll take anything to hit the car. That was a crazy scene.
Yeah.
That was a really, really crazy scene.
So, speaking of sort of the collateral damage of Jesse and using the word in this way, we have two more really that are in the same scene. That's Odin Quincannon and then Donnie, and they interact a little bit this episode. So we see Donnie in bed, doesn't want to get out of bed. His wife Betsy threatens to sleep with the guy from accounting if he doesn't get out.
I liked her.
Sassy.
Yeah.
So interesting
Sassafras.
that every of the people that have been in touch, I mean, and Linus to the bus driver to an extent may have an inkling of something.
Yeah.
But I mean, Donnie of everybody just has a full understanding that there's something that was said to me. He's got total control.
Right.
Somehow.
Which I think makes sense, because when somebody tells you to put your gun in your mouth and you can't physically not do it, that's a whole next level. I mean, I know with the bus driver, there was the bathroom scene and all of that, but there's nothing, I don't think there's anything like having a gun in your hand and putting it in your own mouth and getting ready to pull the trigger and not wanting to do that and not being able to help it. So it makes sense that for him the stakes are even higher.
Yeah, that seems like an absolutely terrifying thing to go through, right? Even if you knew the gun wasn't loaded, it seems like just the concept of it seems terribly frightening.
Yeah, well, you see that through the whole episode. It is just weighing on him. I mean, did he just want to go to work? I mean, you find out why he wasn't in the last episode.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you see with that emotional moment where he breaks down with his wife while they're having lunch outside the school. Just
Did you think she was gonna be like, Donnie, don't cry? I thought she was gonna say, don't you cry in public, Donnie, or something like that.
This is an interesting question from my Patton in the chat. Okay, so Donnie is a piece of but I actually feel bad for him. Do you guys?
I mean, they made him a lot more sympathetic this episode. The fact that he was going to kill Preacher in a bathroom for embarrassing him doesn't make him seem like the best dude. But, I mean, they're setting up Preacher to be a little bit of a bad guy right now. And that's what you're talking about, is him seeming like a little more redeemable. That's a consequence of that. They're making somebody seem worse than him.
Right. Zach says, I can't figure out if I should hate Donnie or feel bad for him. Should I hate his wife, feel bad for her? Because remember when earlier on we thought she was getting abused, and we thought the kid was getting abused, and we thought neither were getting abused. I don't know where I stand on that either.
Well, I don't think, certainly as we've been talking about this season, at least my feeling is that things are going to come crashing down on Jesse. And I feel like, as his wife was saying right there, it's like, Preacher's going to pay. It's going to happen at some point. And you'll be there to take care of.
Yeah, so we're going to touch on Quincannon here, but talking about Donnie, this actually brings to mind something that I think is kind of interesting, right? So Donnie was an important part of the first episode, because he's part of that sort of like that emotional moment we get with Jesse, where we see him have the bar moment. Mm-hmm. In the pilot episode, the three main characters of the show each get an action scene. Cassidy on the airplane, Jesse in the bar, Tulip in the car. Mm-hmm. Each one of them gets a fighting scene where they seem super awesome. The pacing of the show, the humor, everything they set up. They touch on a lot of things, and they made the pilot. I guess they didn't know if they were going to get a show or not. Thinking about how they've handled each character since the pilot, I feel a little bit of a bait and switch, to be honest with you guys. Thinking about this, I think that they really sold you kind of this idea of how each character was going to feel in the show in that pilot, and I don't think we've gotten much of it. Right? Don't you feel like they really took it down a notch since then?
Yeah, I mean, I guess out of all of them, probably Cassidy the least, because we did have that fight with the angels in the church, so we saw a little bit more of that. But certainly with Jesse, I feel like you get that glimpse, and all you hear is Tulip just describing Jesse, but you never really get to see that other side of Jesse. And it would be interesting if we could have saw actually that flashback, see rather than tell us about that, to see Jesse more in action, to kind of have more of a vested interest, like, oh, that's a Jesse I want to see more of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's trying to be a good guy.
Yep.
He keeps going back to that. We can be a good guy. I'm trying to be a good guy.
Yeah, I just still find it fascinating that like I guess the difference is that I would have expected by episode 4 maybe we were there, but it seems like 6 maybe. I do feel like things are going to change next episode. I definitely get that sense. We're going to get some stuff's going to pop off. So let's talk about Quincannon, because he does some downright awful stuff at the end of the episode.
He's just serving God.
He's serving God.
But I'm trying to understand the literal interpretation of just serving God. Like what when he uses the gun and he kills all those people from Green Acres. Like, how's that serving God?
I mean, I think so. He says, if we grow or we die. He says that to Miles. I would think in his mind, he's supposed to be, a winner, or protect his town, or protect his success or something. Some part of that to him is what God's plan for him is.
I think you ask a lot of bad people why they do these things. I think if you would talk to Hitler or Mussolini, what are they doing? Who are they serving? What is the greater good here? A lot of people would say that just because you are serving God doesn't mean that you're serving him in the correct way or what your God looks like.
Totally.
Well, I agree. Like what your God is. I mean, that doesn't mean what Quincannon's God may not be what everybody else's God is.
Right. So his God clearly, you grow or you, what is it? You
grow or you die.
You grow or you die. So if his God thinks that and his God has shown him that these people need to go, then he's choosing to grow for his God, which is a very scary thought.
It's all about meat, slaughtering meat, power in this place. I don't know.
Also, I mean, when we talk about things changing, I think that scene in particular, unless Quincannon's going to kill Miles also, I mean, that was a big thing that just happened. There's 4 dead bodies in Quincannon's office. Yeah. So seems to be an evil dude. Getting rid of those bodies will be priority number 1, but he's got a loose end. So you do have to start to think.
What's going to happen with the mayor?
Yeah, I mean, connecting some of the pieces, there's going to be some fallout, you know?
Yeah, I don't think Miles is going to go away anytime soon. I think he's going to realize, what am I stuck in? He's going to get way over his head very quickly, but I don't think he's going away anytime soon. Because I think you want to just see him just trapped in this horrible situation he's found himself in.
I talked to him at the premiere, and he wants to come on, so maybe we'll see if we can get him in here next week or the week after. Yeah. All right, so last but not least, we see Quincannon kill these folks, and I guess that's kind of the end of the episode. Is there anything else to touch on with that?
Just that one scene that I thought was interesting with Emily. Like, there's something about just Emily and her either going to or coming from the bathroom. Yeah. They just seem to really focus on a lot of that with her character.
Yeah.
Like, and just that scene with her and Tulip. Just what an incredibly vulnerable position to find yourself in.
Yeah. And people in the chat were joking that she was caught with her pants down.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. True. Nothing true has ever been said. Something interesting in the chat from Anime, the mayor is too weak to say anything.
Yeah, I do think he's gonna be in I'm terrified and I'm not gonna speak up mode, or I'm gonna get killed.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I saw 4 people killed in front of me. I'm
right,
very quiet.
But something. Also, yeah. So let's get into predictions here, because I want to know what you guys think. Maybe Donnie's gonna do about everything as well.
And now your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
All right, guys, so we are going to do a little round of predictions here, and then we are going to do our sign-off and do our spoiler-filled predictions that relate to the comic book. These ones are based entirely on the show, what we've seen on the show, only things that we know from the show. So first and foremost, we have these 4 dead bodies in the mayor's office, and we have Donnie has this inkling, or in Quincannon's office, and Donnie has this inkling of what's going to happen. I think that that Donnie is going to be on a crusade from here on out to try to convince the town what's going on. I think maybe he and Miles may even connect on their theory.
Okay.
Interesting. Interesting that you have Donnie and Miles getting together for that.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. But I feel like, yeah, Donnie's going to be doing... Donnie's going to have some moment where he's going to take an opportunity to try to really stick it to Jesse. There's going to be a moment where he's going to get a chance to come in. And
if not him, then Donnie's wife, because I feel like she really wears the pants over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
Interesting one from the chat I could pretend to steal, but I'll give it credit. Sky the Boss 96, Quincannon might actually be the devil and not servicing God, but servicing the devil. Interesting thought. If we've got God at play, we could have the devil.
Yep.
And I feel like certainly next episode we're finally going to have Jesse start to come to a realization of what he's got inside him and the decision. Does he want to give it up? Does he not want to give it up? Is it what he thought it was? Is he going to change the way he uses it based on what he knows now that it is?
Would it even fit in the coffee can if he wanted to?
Right. It's a very powerful being. I mean, I agree with you. I think that the realization and the change is definitely going to happen next episode. I think that Cassidy and Tulip, I think she's very clearly using Cassidy, and I do think that it's going to last for a moment, but I do think she's going to drop Cassidy like a hot rock as soon as Jesse's back in the picture, and that
So you think Jesse will be back in the picture?
Absolutely. And
Season 1.
Maybe by the end of Season 1, but I think that he may or may not know about what went on with them. Like, she may or may not tell him, and Cassidy may or may not, but I think it's going to linger for a long time. I think that's going to be something that happened that they don't talk about.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how that works, because there's so much other story that has never been that is still lays ahead in the comic that you're just wondering, like, doing things that they've done now kind of alters that dynamic. So you wonder, like, how are they going to backpedal on this, because there's so much more story to tell.
Yeah, definitely. Any other predictions that are non-spoilery?
Nope.
people were gonna get blood on their face. What I saw in that track, yeah. Finally, which is great. Like a bloody Jesse Custer means that there's something happening, and that gets me excited.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We're gonna do spoiler predictions right now, but before we do, I'm gonna give you a quick pseudo sign off. My name is Ben Bateman. You can find me at Ben Bateman Media on Twitter and Instagram.
My name is Roxy Striar. You can find me everywhere at Roxy Striar. And shout out again to AMC for being awesome and having their podcast and helping to represent us. I know they named us as one of the top preacher podcasts this past week, which is really
cool.
Really awesome. So huge thanks to them.
Yeah,
ooh, awesome. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Frank Moran at Happy Go Jackie. I'm going to be just coasting on these AMC props. Yes, all week.
All right, guys, we're going to do spoiler predictions. Spoiler alert!
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
Okay, so revisiting the Tulip and Cassidy thing, there's zero way that the story goes forward and Jesse doesn't see the light and that Cassidy and Tulip is a thing that lasts. I mean, maybe it even lasts for a minute, but absolutely, Cassidy is getting his heart. Like, in the comic, it comes out of nowhere. He does just surprise her and just, you have no idea it's coming, and it lingers. So the fact that they're at least setting up some context for that now, there's a reason that Cassidy thinks that he loves Tulip.
Do you think there will be a problem once Cassidy finds out that Tulip's boyfriend is Jesse? Do you think Cassidy would back off or no?
God, it's interesting you say that. It's crazy that he doesn't know.
Right.
But
that conversation between Tulip and Cassidy, where they're kind of talking around Jesse without mentioning him by name, didn't bother me so much because I'm trying to think, if you were just talking to some dude that you just kind of met, you're not going to divulge your whole life story and backstory to somebody. So the fact that she didn't he's a preacher in this town, his name's Jesse, I mean, the fact that she didn't mention those in that conversation didn't bother me as much.
What about, why do you guys think the phone stopped ringing?
See, I feel like that's I feel like they went to the next level, and that's where I feel like you see like the Saint perhaps starting to get called into service.
That's what I was
That's
guessing.
what people were talking about in the chat. The cowboy has been called. That's why the phone has stopped ringing. That's from Andre.
Yeah, I think so too.
But what's frustrating is I feel like we're seeing these storylines being told out of sync. So without seeing like the whole payoff to the cowboy, to see where he turns into the Saint, to see where this leads up to maybe them going down to pull him out into service. Like, I feel like we're a different. We're just out of sync with these stories.
I mean, to revisit the whole idea that this is a binge show, I'm pretty sure that the Saint storyline happened in the third episode, the flashback we saw.
Yeah.
It's either the second or the third, but I mean, it's divided by 1 or 2 episodes. It's either 3 and then comes back in 5, or it's 2 and comes back in 5. If we see more in 6, then you're watching, as a binge person, you're probably watching 3 episodes a day of this show, maybe even 4. You kind of get a lot of that story all at once, and I guess it does start to make a bit more sense. I think that the Saint does start to show up next episode. I think the big thing is that the reason I feel like the change is coming is because Fior and DeBlanc say, look, it's not God inside you, it's something else. And they start talking about angels and demons. So I think
Genesis, yeah.
I think once Jesse realizes, okay, this isn't God, this is something else, where's God? That's the question that he's going to ask. And as soon as he realizes, when they say, well, God isn't there, God took off, that's when Jesse's going to be like, okay, so I'm doing this myself, but God took off? He abandoned all these people? Now, that's when I think the story starts, and that's why I do think that next week we start to really get there.
And that's when we'll start to see the Jesse that we want to see.
Yeah, well, it's becoming very clear, and this was like a strange thing, because I can't remember if it was in the bio or like at that one of those interviews at the premiere, but somebody said, we really do focus on this town of Anvil, and I heard that and I was sort of like, I wonder for how long. Or we leave and we come back or something, but it really does seem like season 1 is entirely going to take place in Anvil, Texas.
And I feel like I feel like you're going to just see everything just fall down around Jesse in this, and realizing that, if God was supposed to be there, he would have stopped this. And the fact that he learns that God is not in heaven, he's abandoned heaven.
Yeah,
I feel like that's going to be a motivating factor when all this blows up in his face. That he's like, I'm going to go get God to make him be accountable for this.
Right.
I mean, again, Evan did say, we're making this show as if we have 7 or 8 seasons. Like, that's what he said to me, which means, maybe this is 10 episodes of an origin story. This ends with them on the road, because the Saint and the whole idea of Cassidy really feeling like he owes Jesse for something, all that stuff that happens in the book with him trying to save him and driving the truck into the Saint and all that, like, and I think that we will see some of that in the next couple of weeks, and I guess the season's probably going to end sort of with the adventure starting.
Yeah, and I'm really curious about with Root, because I mean, Root in the comics in that first storyline, I mean,
awful. Yeah.
He's just awful right from page 1.
You hate him.
Yeah, and you're just waiting for something bad to happen, and something bad happens at the end. But this, I mean, until this episode, like you were saying, Ben, like we haven't really seen anything flash up from him. So I wonder, are the next 4 episodes going to be painting him in more of a darker light so that something bad happens to him at the end? You're like, all right, yeah.
I almost feel like that bad thing that happens to him, I almost feel like it happened to Donnie. That's I almost am like wouldn't be that surprised. Yeah.
I'd actually think that'd be a cool twist.
Yeah.
And not to be such a shipper, because I really am, but part of the thing that makes the comics amazing for me is the relationship between Tulip and Jesse. So I really hope that we get that at some point, or at least in flashbacks or something. We see where they have, I don't know, it's important for me. It's important for the story.
Yeah, that's why I wish we at least saw some more context to what their life was before the whole Carlos incident happened, because I don't see any of that spark right now, and it's frustrating to, like, how can I get invested in Tulip's insistence that they should be together and do this thing when I have no idea, like, I've never seen them in that awesome phase of their relationship.
Well, you definitely, I mean, like I said, the look on her face when she's with Cassidy, they make a point of showing you her face and how dissatisfied with what's going on she looks. You know that there's a reason that they showed you that look, right? She's not into it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's not gonna last, and yeah, I think give it a couple episodes. But anyway, I think that does it on my end. You guys have any more thoughts? Anything else from the chat right now?
BMP123, I think it's going to end with the Saint coming after Jesse. Interesting prediction.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's just interesting, just as we talked a little bit briefly here, just when fans of the comic watching this being adapted here, and just I know that things have to change, and it's just so interesting with this that there's so much that they're changing for this compared to other adaptations for stuff. And I guess it's just harder. For some reason, I'm finding this one harder than with other adaptations that I've had to be able to let go and just let them do their thing with this story.
I'm in totally the exact same boat. Like I said, I can't wrap my head around why this is such a struggle, because I'm a huge fan of adaptations. I mean, even something like Game of Thrones, which is so popular, and they've done such a good job of communicating so much of the books. The people that have read the books know they skip so much. They really, they can't cover all of it. They don't seem to have problems. They love it. And I think that's really fascinating that for some reason there's like something about this changing. I struggle with it every single episode.
It's a slow burn. I think we're going to end up in a good place, but it's a slow burn.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to talk to Evan and the crew, just to pick their brain. I'd love to just hear why they made the choices that they did. I'd find that fascinating to see how they did.
Maybe
that.
we can get them on here. Let's look into that.
Oh, all right.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week for Roxy Striar's penultimate 6th episode review.
Hey, but you want to know what the saddest part is about the big penultimate 6th episode? Roxy Striar won't be here for it.
No. You've got to at least tweet us or text us what you thought.
Oh, 100%.
All right.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. You just heard us do our sign off, so we will skip them. But we'll see you next time, same place, with Dave back in the chair. Woo. And no Roxy Striar. Happy 4th of July, because it'll be the 4th of July before that happens?
No.
Oh, it's the 3rd of July next Sunday.
Happy 3rd of July, everybody.
Love you guys. Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.